This is the BBC.
Simon Mayo, 88 to 91 FM, BBC Radio 2.
Hello and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast from your friends at BBC Radio 2. And we're going to start just to prove that it is genuinely us with a Radio 2 ident, which is called Strawberry Ramp, which I have to say until a few moments ago, I'd never heard before. Anyway, let's enjoy it together. You can see what they're doing.
88 to 91 FM,
Oh, right.
BBC Radio 2.
Anyway, that's us. So what follows is an audio array of terrible tales, as normal, from the unbelievably sinful Radio 2 listener, all seeking forgiveness from the juggernauts of justice. Anyway, it was another bank holiday, so you just get the three, super concise, but the three good ones. Free van in Paris is number one. A mouse is not a home is number two. And our final one, with an extra guest appearance from another presenter, is Keep On Trucking. Dear assemblage of the highest authority, that'll be you guys. Having heard the Italian car hire confession the other week, I was put in mind all those ridiculous rules you have to go through. I was put in mind of another incident that also involved hidden extras and our own particular mishap. It's 1992, we lived just outside Cardiff and decided to take an extended family holiday trip to France. That was me, my wife, our three children, my wife's sister, her husband, their three children, and also another nephew. A total of 11 people.
11. Right.
That's gonna be trying, I would have thought. Anyway, we booked the resort, but also a lot of fun, and how nice to have a family that wants to go on holiday together.
Yeah.
We booked the resort, ferry, and a 12-seater minibus, and we're all prepared for our summer trip. I went to collect it on the booked date, and there it was, a brand new minibus with just 560 miles on the clock. That's okay. We travelled to France and settled into our holiday with joy and with gusto. We decided to visit Paris and set off on a beautiful sunny day. I can't speak for now, but at that time there was a definite lack of on-street parking in Paris. I think that's something that you could say in general is,
That's what's
do you
wrong
know,
with
where
the
are
French
we, dear?
capital.
We're on the Champs-Élysées. Is there anywhere to park? No. What's wrong with them? Maybe if I shout, that would help. Anyway, having driven around the centre several times, I was becoming a little testy. Where is this driving? With the advice from the sat-nags sitting in the back. Anyway, I spotted a sign for a car park and turned off into an underground car park. Fortunately, the overhead height limit hanging bar was comfortably passed under, and I drove down the ramps before finding a space on level 5 and skillfully, I thought, parking the van. We all then spent a nice day in Paris, though the coffee prices were charged at tourist sucker rates, which we did not find out until the bill arrived. But we expect this kind of stuff. We returned to the van replete and happy and set off to return back up the ramps and back to our holiday park. Now, an interesting feature of this particular minibus that we hired is that the front wheels are really close to the front of the vehicle. I mean, obviously that's the standard thing, but this means they were really close. This means that when you go down a ramp onto the flat, the vehicle height is continually lowering as the rear vehicles come down the ramp. However, as you go up a ramp, the height of the vehicle is exponentially raised above its expected height because the front wheels lift the vehicle high up the ramp before the rear wheels reach the bottom of the ramp to follow.
Oh, excellent. That makes perfect sense.
Did you follow that?
Yeah, all of that, yeah.
Shall I draw you a map?
No, I understand that, but I'm trying to visualise how that would really happen.
If you stay around after class, I'll paint you a picture. Okay.
It's all right.
It doesn't take much imagination.
Well, it takes a bit.
Well, it obviously does. To guess what happened next. I don't know. What could have happened next? There was a very loud screech, which alarmed me so much I stopped, thinking I'd run over someone. I got out, looked around, expecting to find some unfortunate, but there was nothing there. I got back in and carried on. There was another screech, and then quiet, and I carried on around up to the next level. As we travelled up the ramp from this level, I heard the same unbearable screech. I got out again, I don't think Dave is particularly bright at this point.
No.
Anyway, then I realised the problem. Well done, Dave. It was the top of the van scraping on the ceiling. No. Now, a sensible person might have sought some way of escaping this predicament by A, letting some air from the tyres out, B, maybe trying reversing up the ramp, or C, pleading with some French person to help. But instead, keeping a very British stiff upper lip and our fingers in our ears, except me because I was driving, we continued up the lamps. I just put more power into the accelerator. Up there to freedom with my passengers reporting sparks coming from the ceiling. As one or two of the ramps, in my haste to escape, they encouraged me to have a bit of a run at it. So as not to risk an embarrassing jam, because that's obviously the worst thing. You don't want to be embarrassed.
No, you don't
And so that's what I did. Everyone put their fingers in their ears. I had a bit of a run at it, and sparks were flying. To cut a long story short, we finished our holiday, returned home with no further incidents, but I had the task of returning the van to the hire company in Cardiff with grooves in the roof. I drove it with trepidation, but displaying the same sense of bravado with which I had faced down the damnable French concrete, I waited for the minute inspection to take place. The employee started looking at every part of the minibus, and I began to sweat on my top lip. I bantered about how good the minibus had been, what we had done, and how the holiday had gone. He looked up at the roof and glanced along the edges. Then he turned to me and said, "That's all fine, sir. Thanks very much." He handed over the receipt for the minibus, and I was off like the wind. Somehow, amazingly, he completely failed to notice that all the middle roof ribs had been scraped down to bare metal, each one nearby flattened for about a foot. I don't think Dave has come clean here. Mm-hmm. Your Holinesses, I seek forgiveness not from the car park owners, as they should have been better at designing their car parks. And there should have been car parks and spaces available in the middle of Paris.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
No, I don't seek forgiveness from the hire company, because they surely got their just rewards for adding all the extras. I know how this is going to go. But purely for the horrified people in the car that followed us up the ramps, looking aghast, as a shower and torrent of sparks flew from the top of our van and all over their vehicles. And to the other people in the car park, who must now believe that they know what a banshee sounds like as they heard it one day in a car park in France. Well, Dave, there's something about you, Dave. I'm not quite sure that you've got everything going on there, because you would think, first of all, the horrendous noise would be coming from up there. It's not coming from down there, and so therefore it's going to be the roof. And I would have thought maybe it would be courteous to just say to the poor chap from the car hire company that you'd made a few grooves in the roof, but maybe that's just me. Sister Bobby is looking quite harsh.
Well, there's a couple of things. Think about the sound in Dave's defence, because those things often echo. It's difficult to get an actual direction of where the sound came from. So it's possible. It is possible that Dave could have been confused. Yeah. The thing is, I think you should have come clean, Dave. I think you're not forgiven because of this. There is the fact that somebody else will hire the van. Of course, no one will check the roof because you don't think to check the roof often, do you? And somebody else could get the blame for your damage. So I don't think I can forgive you, Dave, for not fessing up. But what you could have done, if you'd have fessed up, you said, look, the van is this height, but the ridges on it are a little bit higher. So that's why I got it wrong, and kind of bartered with them and said, look, I think actually the height of your van is just a little bit more than you think, because we took a few millimetres off just to test it. That's what I'd have done. There you go. So I don't think, Dave, I can forgive you, because somebody else would have to take the
Plus,
blame.
the guy from the car hire company will have copped it, wouldn't he? Because he signed off on it, and clearly there are grooves in the roof, Brother
Well,
Matthew.
that is true, but, that's what he's supposed to do. It's very easy to be wise after the event here and say, oh, he should have done that, and he should have let air out of the tyres and perhaps not had a run at it in order to clear the roof. But which of us would honestly say that in the same position we would all sort of try and brazen it out with the car hire company? I mean, I am guessing that Dave was thinking, well, they're obviously going to spot this because there's barely any roof left on this minibus, so I'm obviously going to have to pay extra. And when it didn't, it was that sort of nice little surprise at the end of the holiday. So I am going to forgive. Apart from the fact that he seems completely flummoxed by the fact that Paris might be popular. There might be people parking in Paris, who'd have thought? But no, I'm going to forgive.
In general, the advice is, if the spark's coming off the top of your car, don't have a run at it.
BBC Radio 2.
Simon and Friends. I was putting mine in this confession last week when my husband and I heard a little rustle in the bushes during our walk and saw what he said was a rat, but I wanted to be a mouse. Anyway, it reminded me of something that occurred about 20 years ago when we were living in Birmingham in the middle of a particularly snowy winter. Because of the cold weather, we were around the house a lot and spent some of the time in the loft. It was a great space up there. We had turned it into a playroom for the scale extra, which is a great thing to do. Our kids and their friends enjoyed it immensely. Then, when my husband was up there one afternoon, he found that most exposed electrical cable for the lights. It had been nibbled, and there were clearly some droppings on the floor. We had, in the words of Lord Rockingham's 11, a moose loose about the hoose. There was a mouse in the house. Where on the stair? Right there, a little mouse with clogs on. There I declare, going clip, clippity, and so on, if you're old. Anyway, we had the mouse, it was in the house, and clearly something needed to be done, and quickly, because you can't put up with this for long. We went to the ironmonger's to buy a mouse trap, and it's a long time ago, and despite the bloke's insistence that we bought a traditional one, we decided to buy a humane trap. He's going for the Bobby vote. And Matt's shaking his head.
Yeah.
Already thinks you're an art student. You probably wear a beret, Jill, when no one's looking. And a poncho. They were quite basic in those days. This is the mousetrap, not the poncho. A little black square plastic tube that sat at an angle with a trap door that closed when something went in the tube. Jobs are good, and we thought, bit of cheese in this, pop it in the loft tonight, and we'll have the mouse tomorrow, saving the house from burning down as it nibbles through our electrical cabling. However, the days passed and the cheese remained untouched despite there being a good selection. A selection of cheeses and crackers.
Some coffee, sir? Lovely.
Yeah, a little bit of Branston there, maybe just... Anyway... So either we had a cheese-intolerant mouse, or it wasn't in the loft anymore. The latter was confirmed when we heard scratching in the extension wall for most of the day and evening. Somehow it must have got stuck or preferred it there. The problem we were faced with was that the mouse was encased in the wall cavity with no way of letting us get to it. And then one of us, I can't remember who, had the brilliant idea of taking off the extension light fitting and building a little ramp up to the hole in the ceiling with a plank, a bit like a mouse agility course.
Yes.
So it'd be easy for it to get there.
Aha.
Not an obstacle course, just an escape hatch.
And it was just saying, here you go, mouse.
There you go. Brilliant. Inspired.
Anyway, that's what we did. So it was a jolly successful ruse because at night we were asleep. While we were asleep, it made its way out of the wall, down the ramp to the trap. Now, I say successful, but not in a we caught the mouse successful, more in a we've managed to get him on the ramp and he's enjoying the cheese before climbing back up again successful. Every morning the trap was down and we'd give the tube a little shake to see if it was occupied. And every day, the same story. No cheese, no mouse. We were at the point of having to admit defeat and get a traditional trap after all, but on the fifth day, our luck changed. The cheese was gone, the trap was down, but this time when we shook the tube, it was full of mouse. Hurrah, success at last, you might think, but success isn't really that sweet with a frightened little mouse in a tube. However, the job was done, and all we had to do was to release it. Now, we had heard stories of homing mice, and because we didn't want to go through this again, we decided to walk the little chap to the local playing fields to release it when the kids weren't there. It was really cold and crisp that morning, and we felt bad about putting it outside, but it was a mouse. Anyway, we didn't have a mouse house. It clearly couldn't live in the tube, and the weather forecast wasn't looking any warmer. We had no choice but to release it. My husband popped the trap on the ground and gently opened the door, but nothing happened for a moment or two. Then this little streak of lightning shot out into a bush, and we were both relieved that it was okay. I was surprised it didn't shoot out in a straight line. It sort of bounced out in a zigzag, presumably because the ground was so cold, and we didn't have time to give it a proper look as it moved so fast. Anyway, it was gone, and we walked back home. We hoped it was okay, looking behind us to check it wasn't planning on following us back, which it wouldn't do. I don't think mice tend to follow you. Matt's got his head in his hand.
Okay.
The next morning I heard a little knock at the door, and when I opened it, there were 3 children standing there in the cold.
Of course.
They were lovely children who, it turned out, belonged to the partner of our next-door neighbour, and they visited with her every 2 or 3 weeks. I offered for them to come in, but they said no, it was okay. They just had something quick to ask. I wonder what it might be. I listened to them, what they had to say, and turned round to look for my beloved, who was sitting in the sitting room. In my sweetest and calmest voice, I called for him, at the same time as moving swiftly away to the kitchen, and said, "Darling, children from next door are here. They're at the door here. they're wondering if you've seen their gerbil. They were playing with it in the loft last time they were here, and they lost it. In case you're wondering, the answer is no, my husband didn't say a thing. He saw their little faces, and he didn't have the heart to tell them that he'd just released their gerbil, otherwise known as a desert rat, into the snow. So, clearly, we were all trying to do the right thing, but it might have ended up being the wrong thing. So we need forgiveness from a number of people for my actions on the day. Firstly, for the poor gerbil for releasing him into a wintry wonderland instead of a desert. To the sweet children next door, but mostly to my poor husband for dropping him in it when the children called. On the bright side, I later found out that they were actually delighted as they were waiting for the gerbil to die so they could have a puppy. Which is a great payoff.
Oh, good. Oh, well.
Thank
never
heavens
mind.
for that.
Here we go.
You should have told us. Now the gerbil's gone, we can have a dog. Anyway. So, well, you can understand how these things might happen. I don't know, would the gerbil have survived? Probably not. It might have been a pampered gerbil, used to its food being delivered and warm climates and a wheel, all that kind of stuff. Sister Bobby, what do you think?
Well, I'm looking at who would have suffered here. So the three children, by not knowing, didn't go to bed heartbroken at the thought of their little pet. The thing they loved more than anything in the world, actually freezing, having a frozen end.
No,
So
they didn't know that.
So they saved them that, and that's a good thing, I think, generally at that age. The parents got the housing wire saved, so they didn't have any more problems, and I think that's, with the interest of safety in the house, that's important. So I'm only thinking of the gerbil. Did the gerbil make it? Well, I think in the interests of freedom, maybe a few days, hours of freedom was worth.
I think the gerbil
the
might have met
frozen
another
end.
gerbil and they lived happily ever after.
It's perfectly possible. The thing is, we will never know, and there was a possibility if actually everyone was all right and the gerbil got a better end than it would have done. And of course, there was a puppy that needed a home. So
Maybe there was a local gerbil community.
Yes.
And they were welcomed.
Yes.
Jill, you're just about forgiven.
Yes.
Matthew.
Well, I'm going to agree with Bobby. I think everyone wins out of this. Kids get a new puppy. Jill stops something gnawing through electrical fittings. And yes, but who knows? Maybe this gerbil did thrive on the outside. Maybe he was the first gerbil to really get through the winter and as we say, set up this gerbil community that other gerbils could aspire to join. So I am going to say definitely forgiven. And also, I've tried those humane traps and we tried them. It was just, I mean, it's all very nice and all that, but prefer
They
the
work
death ones.
very well.
Dear Father Simon and the demagogues of divine deliverance.
Oh, I like that one.
Yes.
Quite good.
I'd like to be called a demagogue.
After hearing your recent car hire related confessions, I felt inspired to finally relieve myself of the guilt that has festered for the best part of 12 years. We go back to the early part of the 21st century when I was newly married and my wife and I's honeymoon was spent touring around British Columbia and Alberta in a rented motorhome, an RV. Yes? Yes. The majority of the trip was bliss. Wide open roads snaking majestically through hills and mountains, rivers and lakes drifted by as we made our way to Banff, travelling the Icefields Parkway to Jasper, every evening spent at a peaceful campsite with a barbecue and cold beer to toast our recent nuptials and a sense of adventure. This sounds great.
Yeah.
It was as we headed back to Vancouver that our idyllic journey was shattered. As we approached the outskirts of a town called Kamloops, we noticed posters at the side of the road for an open day at the local railway engine sheds and decided to stop in for a look. Unfortunately, this is the point where our hitherto excellent map reading skills let us down. We missed our turn and found ourselves approaching Red Bridge, which crosses South Thompson River. This is very specific for our Canadian listeners. This is an old narrow bridge with a section in the middle covered by a metal lattice frame, not really designed with motorhomes in mind, you would imagine. But, Father Simon, I was helpless. I could not stop or turn around. I had no choice but to continue. I slowed down to almost a crawl and moved as close to the edge of the road as I could. Most of the vehicles on the other side did likewise and passed without issue. Suddenly, and to paraphrase the Eagles, it was a Canadian, my lord, in a flatbed Ford, but from where I was sat, he certainly wasn't slowing down to take a look at me. For the purpose of the confession, let's call him Colt Seavers. Although I know the full guy is an American show, but anyway, that's what I'm running with. As Colt Seavers approached at speed, with what seemed no intention of using caution to pass me, I started to get a very bad feeling about what was about to happen. And happen it did. As Colt passed, there was an almighty crash as the wing mirror of the RV hit the wing mirror of the pickup truck. My wing mirror was pushed inwards, and I was relieved to see that the glass was intact. Colt's mirror was not so lucky. It looked like a relatively new pickup. The new wing mirrors probably power-assisted and heated with all kind of luxury add-ons, except now one wasn't particularly. It was actually strewn across the Red Bridge, a trail of shattered glass, plastic and wires. My thoughts immediately went back to the RV rental office and the lecture on what to do in the event of an accident. I remembered it seemed quite long-winded and cumbersome and involved a lot of forms. Anyway, we couldn't stop on the bridge and hold people up, so after crossing, I turned into a side street to see if Colt would arrive. Sure enough, he did, and as he got out of his truck, with what was left of his wing mirror flapping forlornly as he slammed the door, he looked a bit peeved, to be honest. It was then I explicitly made the decision for which I seek forgiveness. You see, and you won't have seen this coming, I am from Wigan, and there is a dialect known as Wiganese, which is a hybrid version of the Lancastrian brogue. As a young boy, my mum tirelessly encouraged me to refrain from using Wiganese words and phrases, usually with a few choice phrases of her own. Thanks to her endeavours, I don't have a particularly strong Wigan accent today. But for some reason, I'd like to think due to the pressure of the situation, I decided to converse with Colt in as broad a Wigan accent as possible. When Colt asked, in his accent, "What the hell are you doing driving out across the bridge?"
Because it's now the Deep South, of course. Yeah.
I replied, and here the words of Mike from Wigan will be spoken by an actor.
Oh, no.
What they doing going so fast? The puggle thee?
"What's that you saying?" says Colt.
What they doing going so fast? The puggle thee?
It's Stuart McConey, isn't he? He's not really an actor, but he's doing very good because he went to school in Wigan. Colt's anger turned to confusion, but he persisted in asking about resolving the situation and stuff like that, to which I replied,
I knows naught about it. What we going to do now?
I could see confusion building as each question Colt asked was met with,
I knows naught about it. What we going to do now?
These, I now learnt, were words that were indecipherable to a Canadian.
I knows naught about it. What we going to do now?
We're just getting our money's worth.
Yeah.
Eventually, Colt let out a frustrated scream and without any exchange of details or form filling, hooray, stormed back to his truck. He drove off at speed, gravel flying as his wheels spun. I don't think he checked his mirrors. So obviously, Father Simon, I need your forgiveness. Not from Colt, as he was driving much too fast across the bridge. And if he'd have just slowed down like everyone else, we'd have passed without incident and an expensive bill to replace a wing mirror. Bad boy. Plus, I'm pretty sure he had a mullet. I don't, which is obviously unforgivable. I don't seek forgiveness either from the RV rental company, as there were only a couple of chips in the paint on my wing mirror. This was dealt with using some Tipex brought from the next supermarket that we stopped at, though it did take a few applications. No, I seek forgiveness from my now dear departed mum for shaming her memory by blatantly using my long subdued Wiganese to get myself out of a very consuming insurance claim.
I knows naught about it. What we going to do now?
Yeah, exactly. So thank you, Stuart, for playing the role of Mike of Wigan. So, Sister Bobby, what do you make of all that then?
Well, you're easily to forgive, Mike, really, because Colt was an idiot, because he wasn't driving to the conditions on the road, which was something was coming his way, he was doing his own thing, and he got what he deserved, really, so I don't mind about that. Also, what I don't mind you sinking into that is Colt was a bit, he's just got a little bit of a swagger on, and he thinks...
I think he had dungarees almost certainly.
I don't mind dungarees. Actually, the only thing I'm cross about, actually, is the mullet, because the thing is, a mullet is a very useful thing. Against hot heat, you get protected from the sun, and it also keeps you warm.
Wear a hat.
Well, no, the thing is the mullet isn't really up for grabs here. It's fine that he's got a mullet, but he's not fine for his swagger and his... basically inability to drive to the conditions on the road. So basically, Mike, you're forgiven.
I bet Colt had a sticker at the back of his truck which we would disagree with. I'll just say leaving that.
Would we?
I'm just leaving that as vague as possible.
Yes, well done.
What do you say, Matthew?
Well, I've taken against Colt not because of the mullet or the sticker on the back of his pickup. I've taken against Colt because of his wing mirror with its fancy heated. Who needs heated wing mirrors? Who needs power assisted wing mirrors?
Yeah,
Why can't you just move them like the rest of us? We all seem to manage with
like
wing
a heated
mirrors.
mirror.
No, nobody needs heated wing mirrors. They just wipe them before you start your car. Wipe your wing mirrors. What is wrong with people that they need power-assisted wing mirrors? End of society right there. So I am going to forgive because I've taken against his wing mirrors.
Right, Bobby just wants to say something.
Well, the thing is, it's Canada, it gets cold. So you might wipe it when you get in, but you go down the road and it freezes again. Also, what do you do about the passenger side? That's when you have that kind of automated thing.
Get out of the car before you go and wipe your wing mirrors.
All right, okay.
BBC Radio 2.
Well, they were this week's confessions, and who did you forgive? And do you have your own shadowy secret? Because, for heaven's sake, it's been a while, and you know exactly the tale that you're dying to tell me. Confessions at bbc.co.uk. So thanks for that. And if you missed any of our drive time shows, you can listen back online. You can download to your smartphone, tablet, that kind of thing, from the iPlayer radio app. Monday was another bank holiday. We did an All Request May Day. Tuesday was a Tuesday. Dire Straits, Paul McCartney, Spandau Ballet and The Doors. Wednesday, Ade Edmondson was in talking about his new children's book, and the former Young One star was talking about how he has a freedom pass and where he goes with it, just for fun. And on Foodie Thursday, it was Nigel with a bitter, flourless chocolate cake with hot cherries and grappa. Very nice. If you made it to the end of last week's podcast, you had to tweet Mr. and Mrs. Pineapple. So thanks to Sergio and Elaine and Jen and Mr. Paney and all the others who got in touch, suitably adorned with pineapple emojis, which was very lovely. This week's code phrase is winky smiley emoji, thumbs up emoji, apple emoji. Thanks. Oh, hang on. ID dollar, this one is.